We've got Denise now, who's got a story to tell us that is, again, another different version of what we've been talking about today. Denise, tell me about your husband and what was special and unique about him and his background.
Thank you. Well, Glenn Mack wasn't my husband, so just to start off with, we were a very independent couple. So he used to jokingly say we were claps, couples who live apart.
Great.
So we were claps.
Sounds good.
So, in terms of Glenn's background, Glenn was a recognised glass artist. Mm-hmm. He'd had a very distinguished career as a stained glass artist. He's got works all through Australia. Quite a few in Melbourne, a few internationally. He had a very storied career. He was a very determined person and he had a very strong, charismatic personality. Mm-hmm. He had been a sociology lecturer at RMIT in his early days. He started as a primary teacher. He then worked for the ABC and did filming down in the Grampians. He was in the education unit and that's where his love of the Grampians started. So he was a resident in Daylesford and Trentham for a long time and ran his studio from there. And then through a change of circumstances, as he got a bit older, he decided to move down to Cavendish, which is down near Hamilton. So some of the issues that have already come up this morning about rural and remote certainly impacted on him as well. Glenn's view was that he should live an authentic life and consequently he should live an authentic death. He was very aware of choices around dying. So for him, the whole process of VAD and dying with dignity was not new. It was sort of part of his overwhelming philosophy. During 2023, Glenn was starting to have mobility issues. So he had trouble walking, there was issues with migraines and headaches, and consequently he was diagnosed with normal pressure hydrocephalus, which was impacting his walking, urinary incontinence and a few different, and it can also lead into dementia, which was for him a real worry. He had a VP shunt put into his head in 2023, and later that year, around November and then December of 2023, he suffered a series of strokes. He was hospitalised on several occasions. We did transition care programs from going from hospital back to home, and again, in a rural area, it's just not worth it. He spent a lot of money and basically got no services. So it was becoming increasingly difficult for him to live independently. We spent a lot of time together. At that time, I was living in the Yarra Valley, so it was basically nearly a 5-hour trip between our houses. And I was down there regularly, but it became more difficult for him to come to the Yarra Valley. The beginning of 24, he got a very bad dose of COVID, which was not long after he'd had his last hospitalisation because of his stroke. He then was in hospital with COVID. After that, it became very apparent that he could not live on his own. He came to me in the Yarra Valley and was with me for approximately 4 months. And at the beginning of that time, the beginning of 2024, he then decided to pursue voluntary assisted dying with more diligence. So we started the process. Our first encounter with the VAD Navigator system, I have to say, was not positive. In that the person we spoke to on the phone basically said, well, I don't think you're eligible, which was sort of surprising in that context that it was an administrative person. We then spoke with a colleague that he knew personally who was also a VAD practitioner, who then put us on the proper path, and we were very fortunate to come across our initial person, which was Tom Callaghan, who was incredibly helpful for Glenn, and we started the process. We then had a round of medical appointments, specialist appointments, various diagnoses. We were working on the theory of his strokes, and at the time he also had a mobile plaque in his neck, which was sort of coming loose. He was also suffering from TIAs, so minor strokes. He was falling. He fell at my place several times, sometimes when I wasn't there, and it was very difficult to get him off the floor, all of those sort of situations. He then decided, he was very determined, he then decided that he needed to take matters into his own hands and have a little bit more advocacy for himself. He then decided that he would go into care, and he went into care in Ballarat in the middle of last year, partly because he didn't want to be dependent on me, and he recognised that it was a lot for me to be doing what I was doing for him, in terms of supporting him and also the advocacy that's required when you're supporting somebody through these choices. By about the middle of last year, we were advised that his application for VAD would not be successful because he didn't have two specialists who could agree regarding a vascular issue. He then went into care and made a good fist of it. You know, he got a mobility scooter, he was out and about, but it was not the life he wanted to live. Glenn's view was very much from a philosophical, existential perspective. I've led a very independent life. I've done all the things I've wanted to do. He had 5 children. He had travelled and lived overseas at different times, but this was not the life he wanted to live. We then started a second VAD proposal with another series of VAD practitioners. All of the VAD practitioners we've spoken with have been terrific. I mean, all of them. They would say, we would sign you off if we could. We can't. We get what you're saying. We understand your philosophical, but we couldn't quite agree of what would happen. If Glenn went off his medication at this stage, it was highly likely that he would have a stroke. Would the stroke kill him? It was unknown. And he was more concerned that if he had a stroke, he may get to the stage where he could not make any decisions. And he didn't want that to happen. We were then advised, we were trying to mount an argument about comorbidities, and we were also mounting an argument that if he went off his stroke medication, yes, he would die. What would be the prognosis? So we were trying to mount a similar argument to people who are on dialysis, that if you go off dialysis, yes, you would die. We couldn't quite get agreement on that. I mean, I can understand some of the legalities. So he then thought, well, the options are now limited. He decided to change his nursing home, partly because the chef where he was now working at the other place, and he liked and he actually likes his food. And the other guy said, the chef said, this place is really lovely and it's got a community feel, and he actually moved to Trentham. And when we went to visit, as he walked in the door, a couple of people said, Glenn, what are you doing here? Because he was quite well known in that original area of Dalesford, Trentham, Creswick, all of those places. So he decided to go there. After about 6 weeks, he spoke to the Director of Nursing and said that he was intending to cease food and fluids. This was after a lot of discussion with myself. And she was incredibly supportive. She put out a notice to her staff. There was a lot of staff from different cultural backgrounds, and she felt that some of them might have some philosophical objections. Yes. And they were very accommodating for Glenn. He then just had what I call his Melba farewell tour. So his children came and visited, family and friends came from Melbourne and where he was living down near Hamilton, people from all over. One of his daughters flew in from America, and he basically had a seat in the Cosmopolitan Hotel, and his glass of rosé would appear almost as soon as he walked in the door. He did like his wine. And so he did all these farewells. He didn't want any of his family to be around at the last process. He then stopped food and fluids on towards the end of June this year. And he was very resolute. The nursing home moved him from the independent wing into more the nursing area because they realised he would need more care in terms of not being an independent liver. He stopped all food. His biggest struggle was giving up fluid. And I don't know if I should say this, but we did actually argue about that. And I said, if you're going to do this, you have to stop. You have to stop the ice blocks. You have to stop literally sips of water. First week was fine. We listened to podcasts. He was very socially and politically engaged. We were listening to political podcasts. We'd listen to music. The second week was very difficult. He would be randomly, and 1 or 2 ice blocks. It honestly doesn't take much to maintain your body. So I decided that I shouldn't argue. It was his death. If it was going to take a longer few days, well, it's going to take a longer few days. He then, unfortunately, had a fall, and we think he might have fractured his hip, and that meant he was in quite a bit of pain. And then he could get relief. Because it's a very difficult story, Glenn's story, because for all intents and purposes, he was well. He had strokes, he had mobility issues, he had no cognitive impairment, but he was very philosophically committed to living his life and living his death. So for him, it was not a hint of, this is difficult, this is really tough, but this is what I'm doing. So the last week, he had his fall on the Monday night. By Tuesday, we'd already had a telehealth palliative care booking made, and by that stage, they could see that he was in a very weakened state. He was now having trouble focusing, and he was starting to drift, and that was good. So we were able to start palliative care in that last week, and he died on Sunday the 6th of July this year. I was with him every day, so I was just staying in motels in the area. The staff were terrific, they were very respectful, but he died. And his view was, I want to have the choice that I can make. So that's how he lived and that's how he died.
Wow. Wow, what a character.
Yeah, he was. He was lovely. I mean, anyone who's met him would say the same. And even in his room at the nursing home, we had a coffee machine, because he loved his coffee as well as his wine. And he would make people coffee of a morning. We had a little Nespresso machine, and the director of nursing would come in and have a chat with him, and he would make her a coffee, and we'd sit there and we'd have coffee and biscuits, not while he was refusing food, obviously. But
Denise, thank you for sharing that very unique and very raw story. It's very recent as well.
There was a very good article in The Age, some of you might have seen it. I think it was the 14th of July, just a week after he died. And some very cheeky photos of him. He was very, very determined.
So coming today, like you, all these wonderful women who we've had today coming and sharing bravely their stories of very deep and personal moments in your lives, tell me, what would you like to achieve today?
I think the legislative changes need to happen. I think the 12 months is an improvement, but for me, I think there should be no time limit. If you're dying, you're dying. I think there are issues, as been highlighted from the 2 previous speakers, about being in rural communities, and Hillsville was classified as, it was still an hour to get to all our medical appointments. I don't think people realise the imposition it is on family and friends and the cost associated. Every time we saw a specialist, it's an expensive process. My advocacy is I think you should all have a very good advanced care directive. We had a very specific one that Glenn's was absolutely no intervention, and that was respected. I think you should have the choice. I think the process is still onerous. The VAD practitioners we saw were wonderful. I'm very fortunate to have met some really lovely people. We ended up seeing 7 practitioners. He had to have 2 psychiatric assessments. Like, it's not an easy process. I was reading recently Travels with Epicurus, which was a book by, I think, Daniel Klein a few years back, and it talks about how do we age authentically. And we don't do it very well in this society. We don't look at ageing particularly well, but equally, how do we die authentically? And it was this book was true to Glenn's philosophy. I mean, I had palliative care friends who said, well, Glenn is aging, not dying. And he would say, yes, but I'm still dying, and I still want to have that choice. Glenn would have been 85 this year. He was quite a bit older than me.
I like that. Denise, thank you so much for sharing that. We're in the interest of time. We're just about to come up to midday, but you've done beautifully well just telling us this incredibly personal story today, as have the other women today here. I thank you very much for joining us, and I hope we can all gain something from what we've heard today. And if you want to watch any of it, we've recorded it, and we can package it up into some personal stories that hopefully will reach a broader audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.